Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to solve some MCQs related to the topic coordination and response, ecology, reproduction in plant and reproduction in human. And these MCQs are taken from the paper 2002 from 2002 to 2010. Now the first MCQs, which is from 2002, June 2002. The diagram shows a section through a brain. This is now no more included in our syllabus. The diagram shows a food web. Which organism is X? Which organism is X? Now how to solve this question? As we can see, all the organisms are eventually leading towards this X. That means this organism should be a decomposer, because we know that eventually all the organisms, when they die or their excretory waste, they eventually return to the decomposer, because when then the decomposer will feed upon it and release the nutrient in the soil as well as in the environment. Now next, which of the following describe the flow of energy in an ecosystem? We know that the energy in the ecosystem, it begins with the producer. So in the producer, what happened? The light energy is converted into chemical energy, and then the chemical energy, this chemical energy is used in the process of respiration, and then and in other processes through those processes this energy is released in the form of heat energy. That's why this answer is correct. Answer C is correct. Now move on to the second question. Which stages in the mosquito life cycle does this method destroy? Achha, this is the question. Draining stagnant water. Draining stagnant water is one method of controlling the malarial mosquito. Now, which stages in the mosquito life cycle does this method destroy? That is, the draining of the stagnant water will destroy. Now, which method? Because we know that the mosquito lay its egg in the stagnant water, therefore the egg stage will be destroyed. Then the larva and pupa, both the larva and pupa, they attach their it is known as spirochete. They attach their spiracles to the surface of the water, and through these spiracles they can breathe. They can take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. That's why egg, larva and pupa, they need stagnant water to survive, and the adult will not, because adult can survive in the dark places too. That's why the correct answer should be B. Okay. Now next, what causes the decrease in oxygen concentration in lake polluted by sewage? Number one is a decrease in dissolved nitrate concentration. Number two is a decrease in the number of consumers. Decrease in number of consumers will never cause the decrease in oxygen concentration in lake polluted by sewage. What causes the decrease in oxygen concentration? So when we increase the number of decomposer, then the decomposer will respire more and they use more oxygen, therefore the oxygen concentration will decrease. So therefore C is the correct answer, but we should look at the D part as well. Increase in the number of green plant. Of course, the increase in number of green plant will increase oxygen concentration, because when the green plant, they photosynthesize and they release oxygen. Therefore, it will increase oxygen concentration. Decrease in the number of consumer also increase. If not increase, then it will not decrease the oxygen concentration, because when the number of consumer will decrease, then the aerobic respiration will also decrease. Therefore, the correct answer is C. Now next, which diagram shows part of an insect pollinated flower? At first, we should recognize what these pollinated part of insect pollinated flowers are. These are known as petals. This is large petal and this is a small or very rudimentary petal. These are the stigma. Small and compact stigma is shown over here, and over here the large and feathery stigma is shown. Then the anther or stamen. The anther is loosely attached over here, and over here the anther is firmly attached. And therefore, which one is insect pollinated flower? 1, 3 and 6 is an insect pollinated flower. So 1, 3 and 6 is part A only. Okay. Now next, The diagram shows a section of non-endospermic seed, because in our syllabus the non-endospermic seed is included, not the endospermic seed. Which structure would show the greatest loss of dry mass during the first week of germination? What makes the dry mass? The dry mass is made by carbohydrate, protein and fats, and we know that these carbohydrate, protein and fats are present in the cotyledon. So during the first week of germination, this carbohydrate, protein and fats are utilized for the growth of radicle and plumule. Therefore, which structure would show the greatest loss of dry mass? The cotyledon. Okay. This is cotyledon. A is cotyledon, B is plumule. This leafy structure which is attached to the cotyledon is called plumule, and this hanging structure is known as radicle, and this outer covering is known as testa. Okay, next, the diagram shows the thickness of the lining of uterus during the menstrual cycle. During which part of the cycle is the woman most fertile? We know that the woman is most fertile during its ovulation period, near to the ovulation period. Okay, so what makes the ovulation period? As the at first look at the thickness of the uterus lining in part A and some part of the B, the uterine lining is reducing in thickness, that's why it is called menstruation. Then in part B, there is increase in the thickness of uterine lining, that is, there is a repair of uterine lining thickness, and in part C and D, there is a maintenance of uterine lining. So if the menstruation it begins at O, so when will the ovulation it occurs? We know that ovulation will occur on the 14th day from the onset of menstruation. So 0 plus 14 is equals to 14. That's why ovulation will happen on 14. So what make the most fertile period? C will make the most fertile period of the menstrual cycle. Okay, now look at June 2003 question. A light of varying intensity was shone into a person's eye for 50 seconds. The graph shows the change in pupil size as the light intensity was changed. Which statement explain the change in pupil size? We know that when the light in bright light, याद है आप लोगों को, in bright light, CCRR, that is circular muscles of iris contract and radial muscle of iris relax, and the pupil size will reduce. And if we keep the iris aside, and if we are considering only the pupil size, then we know that when there is a bright light, then the size of the window should reduce in order to reduce the amount of light entering the eye, so that it will cause less damage to the retina. So what should happen when the light intensity, the diameter of the pupil size is gradually increasing when the light intensity was changed. So as the diameter of the pupil size is gradually increasing, that means the light intensity is reducing gradually. Okay? So the light intensity slowly became dimmer because the diameter of the pupil size is gradually increasing. We know that the size of the diameter of the pupil will increase when the light intensity decreases. So as it shows the gradual increase in the diameter, therefore it is the light slowly became dimmer. It cannot be light suddenly become dimmer, because when the light suddenly become dimmer, then there should be a quick increase in the pupil size. Okay. Now the diagram shows some animals and green plants sealed in an aquarium. Sealed. Now this is a main point. Sealed in an aquarium. What must be supplied to the organism to keep the organism alive for the longest possible time? Now look at this diagram. Now over here the airtight seal is important, because there is no entry of oxygen and no exit of carbon dioxide, or there is no entry of carbon dioxide and no exit of oxygen over here. So we should keep it in mind. What was the question? The question was what must be supplied to keep the organism alive for the longest period of time? So we cannot supply oxygen, we cannot supply carbon dioxide, so it should be light, because it is a transparent container. It is a glass plate, that means it is a transparent container. So light should be supplied, because when we supply the light, then the carbon dioxide will be taken in when the fish it respire, then it releases carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide is taken in by the plant, which is used in the process of respiration, and then it releases oxygen, which is used by the fishes or by the aquatic organism. Okay, so therefore light energy is the correct answer. B is the correct answer. Now move on to the next question. The diagram shows a pyramid of biomass for the food chain grass, zebra and lion. Which process causes loss of biomass for this food chain? We know that loss in biomass, let's see, digestion, yes, can be decreased, can causes the loss of biomass. Growth will cause increase in biomass. Photosynthesis will cause increase in biomass. So B or C we will rule out immediately. And then what about digestion and respiration? So in this food chain, the digestion will not occur in the grass. Therefore, respiration is the most appropriate answer. Okay. Now, the diagram shows the flow of energy through the ecosystem. Which arrow represent the smallest amount of energy transferred between the organism and the largest amount of energy lost to the ecosystem? Now, at first we should look at this arrows. Producer, from the producer to primary consumer, we know that producer contain the maximum amount of energy from the sun, and in each trophic level 90% of the energy is lost and only 10% of the energy is passed on. So primary consumer will also lose 90% of the energy and only 10% will be passed on to the secondary consumer, and the secondary consumer will also lose 90% of the energy and only 10% is passed on to the subsequent consumer, that is the tertiary consumer. So which arrow represent the smallest amount of energy transferred between the organism? The smallest amount of energy is transferred in 2, because almost 90%, 90, 91, 80% is already lost. So smallest amount of energy is transferred at 2 and largest energy loss will occur at 3. Okay. So move on to the next point. The diagram shows some stages in the nitrogen cycle. Which arrow represent the action of decomposers? At first we should label all these points. What is A? Nitrate to plant protein, it should be absorption. And then what is B? Nitrate to atmospheric nitrogen, it should be denitrification. And then ammonium compound to nitrates, and then nitrate, it is nitrification, because we know that conversion of ammonium ion to nitrate ion is called nitrification, which is done by nitrifying bacteria. And then plant protein to ammonium compound, whether it is plant protein or animal protein, its conversion to ammonium compound will always done by putrefying bacteria, that is decomposers. So this process is called decomposition. Which arrow represents the action of decomposers? So D arrow represents the action of decomposers. Now the diagram shows a section through carpel of a flower, cross section through a carpel of flower just before fertilization. Where are just before fertilization is the keyword, just before fertilization. Where are the male and female gamete just before fertilization? We know that female gamete is present in the embryo sac. So this is embryo sac, the female gamete is present in the embryo sac, and just before the fertilization, this male gamete is located in the pollen tube near the micropyle. In the micropyle it is present. So the male gamete is present over here at point 3 and the female gamete is present in the embryo sac at point 5. So 5 and 3 is correct. Male gamete is present in 3 and female gamete is present in the region of 5. That's why D is the correct answer. Okay. Now, thoda erase kar deti hu so that you can see that clearly. Male gamete should be located in this point and female gamete should be located in this point. Okay, just before fertilization. Now look at this question number 35. The diagram shows a developing fetus. Where does gaseous exchange occur between the fetus and mother? We know that the gaseous exchange takes place in the placenta. So where is placenta? C is placenta, B is amniotic fluid, A is umbilical cord, and D could be uterus wall or uterine lining or endometrium lining. Therefore, C, placenta is the correct answer. Gaseous exchange, we know that gaseous exchange between the fetus and mother, it occurs in the placenta. Now next, which of the following are genetically identical? A brother and sister in the same family, genetically identical. We know that genetically identical or offsprings are produced by asexual reproduction. It cannot be done by gametes, it cannot be done by seeds, because we know that how the seeds are produced after fertilization. Fertilization means fusion of male and female gamete, and we know that the ovule it develop into seed. Ovule develop hota hai seed mein after fertilization. Therefore D is wrong, C is outrightly wrong. Now brother and sister in the same family, we know that brother and sister in the same family, they both are formed after fertilization of male and female gamete, therefore it is again wrong. B is the correct answer. Cutting taken from the same plant, cutting taken from the same plant is a part of asexual reproduction. Therefore 37B is the correct answer. Now 2004, which diagram show how light from a distant object is focused on the retina to form a clear image? Distant object. So distant object, we know that from the distant object the parallel light rays are entering. Now A is the correct answer. Why A is the correct answer? Why not D? Because D is always a correct answer whenever the object is given. So if the object is given and the image is formed on the retina, which is smaller in size, and it is inverted, then D is the correct answer. But if the object is not given and the pointed image is formed, then A is the correct answer. Okay? Therefore A is the correct answer. Now the diameter of the person's pupil is measured as the light intensity is varied. During which period does the light intensity increase fastest? We know that when the light intensity increases, then the diameter of the pupil decreases. In part B, the diameter of the pupil decreases but at a lower pace. In D, the diameter of the pupil decreases but at a faster pace. Therefore D is the correct answer. Now look at A and C. In A and C, the diameter of the pupil is increasing. In C, it is also increasing. Here at a faster pace and here at a slower pace. Therefore D is the correct answer, because the light intensity increase fastest was the question. Okay. Now next, a single plant provide food for many herbivores. The herbivores supply food for a few carnivores. Which pyramid of number and which pyramid of biomass shows this information? Single plant, pyramid of number, single plant, feed by many herbivore, and the herbivore supply food for a few carnivore. So in pyramid of number, we will considering the number. So one plant, many, and few. So it should be like this. Pyramid of number should be like this. Whereas pyramid of biomass, in CIE, pyramid of biomass is always upright. It is not correct, but in CIE they say that it should be upright. Why? Because in each trophic level 90% of the biomass is lost through the process of respiration, excretion, and ingestion. Therefore X and Y are the correct answer. So where pyramid of number X and pyramid of Y is, therefore C is the correct answer. Now, the diagram shows flow of substance within an ecosystem. The circle represent trophic levels, and which circle represent herbivore? Which circle represent herbivore? A. Towards A, all the there is a flow of organic compound towards A. So that should be decomposer, because towards A there is a flow of organic compound. Therefore A should be decomposer. So if A is decomposer, and flow of carbon dioxide is represented by a dotted line. So carbon dioxide is flowing towards B only. Okay, so B should be producer. So if B is producer, then C should be herbivore and D should be carnivore. Okay, so which circle represent herbivore? So B is the correct answer. C is the correct answer. Okay. This collectively is called placenta. This embryonic villi and the uterus wall is collectively called placenta. This is called umbilical cord, and this is called fetus. Which will increase in concentration as the blood flow from 1 to 2? Which will increase in